Yeah, we've had apologies from David Flint, Phil, Skip and Ted Hand today.
Good morning. That's fine, don't worry, it's no problem at all. Good morning, thanks very much for inviting me to give a quick presentation on the Chepstow Transportation Study that Capita have been commissioned to undertake by Monmouthshire County Council. My name's Michelle North-Jones. I work as a Senior Transport Planner for Capita in their Cardiff office. Capita have been commissioned to undertake a Stage 1 well tag appraisal. I will describe later what well tag stands for and the appraisal process that we're going to be going through, to assess potential solutions, to look and address issues on the A48 as it travels through Chepstow and also as it goes over into the side of South Gloucestershire. The study will look at defining the problems and the issues in the study area, developing some scheme objectives for appraisal, and also appraising a long list of solutions against national, regional and local objectives, as well as considering some key deliverability issues for the long list of solutions as we appraise them. The output of this Stage 1 study will hopefully be a short list of options that can be taken forward for further, more detailed quantitative appraisal at the next stage. So in terms of the study area, it's Chepstow is the focus, with the A48 as it travels down through the Hardwick Hill, across the River Wye and then out into South Gloucestershire. The A48 serves a strategic purpose in that it provides access for those communities in South Gloucestershire and the Forest of Dean across Chepstow down onto the M48 and then across into Bristol. So it's an important strategic route, as it is for Chepstow, to provide access across into England. But it also serves as a local route as well, providing access for key local journeys, particularly for the communities of Tutshill and Sedbury, and access back into Chepstow. As the scheme is cross-border, it hasn't been undertaken in isolation just with Monmouthshire County Council. We are actually working alongside Gloucester County Council and their officers in order to gain their input into the study as well. So just a little bit of background. Many of you probably know that there is an issue with congestion along the A48 in Chepstow, as well as queuing on the Gloucester side of the A48. Historic studies have been undertaken to try and look at solutions for how that congestion can be addressed. Some have come up with things such as the Chepstow bypass and also route corridor improvements, but for one reason or other have never been taken forward. As a result of the congestion on Hardwick Hill, there is an air quality management area now in place and has been in place since 2007. There are many benefits to looking at a potential solution and improvements along the A48. Obviously addressing the congestion issue, which should hopefully then help with the air quality management issue. But there's also the wider benefit of potentially unlocking developable land within Gloucestershire. This map just shows a map of the extent of the air quality area as it goes down the hill, through Hardwick Hill and down into the centre of Chepstow. So the appraisal tool that we'll be using to look at any options that we develop will be either the Welsh Transport Appraisal Guidance alongside the 5-case model. The reason that we'll be looking at using 2 appraisal tools is because the scheme is cross-border. Therefore, it needs to be compliant should it go forward for funding with both Welsh appraisal processes for transportation schemes and also English appraisal processes for investment in transportation scheme. This isn't too difficult to comply with both because both are based on the HM Treasury Green Book, which is the official government source for looking at investment into transportation schemes. There's 3 key stages to WELTAG and to the 5-case model. These are the strategic outline case, the outline business case and the full business case. And those first 3 stages are looking at pre-implementation of any scheme. So they're concerned with appraising before a scheme is actually implemented and undertaking the decision on whether investment should actually occur. The other 2 stages, they're implementation and post-implementation, and they're concerned with gathering lessons learned information and best practice about the implementation of the scheme to share with others after the scheme is on the ground. At each of the 5 cases, the first 3 stages, it's strategic outline case, outline business case and full business case, it's important to make a case for the full 5 cases that are detailed in the 5-case model. And these 5 cases are the strategic case, the management case, economic case, financial case and commercial case, so that you can create a full argument and set of evidence for why an investment should go forward. This is just the WELTAG stages and the 5-case model stages in diagrammatic form. As I said previously, we're at stage 1, which is the strategic outline case. It's the very first stage, so it's very high-level qualitative appraisal as opposed to quantitative detail appraisal, which would take place at further stages of stage 2 and stage 3. So the progress to date. We've been commissioned for about a month now, so we've actually held an inception meeting with the Monmouthshire officers and also Gloucestershire officers to discuss the direction of the study. But we have also last week undertaken one of the key stages of the first stages of undertaking the appraisal, and that was a WELTAG workshop. That was attended by a good range of representatives from Monmouthshire County Council, Gloucestershire, the Forest of Dean District Council, as well as Welsh Government. And in that workshop, we looked at defining all the problems and the issues for the study area. We also looked at defining some scheme objectives that any solutions would be appraised against, just to make sure that any solutions definitely address the problems and issues in the study area. And then there was a good discussion about potential solutions, which we will then take away and develop further for appraisal. So the next stages of our work, they include a further meeting to be held with Sustrans. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make the workshop, so we'll be talking to them about any active travel issues in the study area and active travel improvements. We'll be undertaking some further consultation with Gloucestershire. Some of their key officers weren't able to make the workshop, so we're going to be undertaking some consultation with them to capture their opinions and thoughts. We're going to be undertaking the appraisal, as I said, of the long list of options. Again, as I said, that will be undertaken against national, regional and local objectives. Will be under, the output of all the appraisal of the long list of solutions will be placed in appraisal tables and a draft report will be produced. That will then be given to a review group, and the review group is totally independent of the people who've undertaken the appraisal. They'll then review the output, provide us with comments, and we will produce a final report which will give a short list of options to take forward for further appraisal and more detailed quantitative evidence gathering at WELTAG Stage 2, which is the outline business case. I've given just a very quick run through of the study, what appraisal processes we'll be using and what we've undertaken to date and what we will be doing going forward. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to ask us at this stage? Yeah.
Thanks for this.
No problem.
We've had a problem for years and years with this, and again, there's always easy money to be found to be putting these strategies together and these cases together and to collect evidence and to consult with people. And then when it gets to, I presume, stage 4 implementation, there ain't no money and it doesn't go forward. So I guess, how confident are you that, if we do have some really good information, evidence in cases, will there be money for implementation? Interesting, Gloucestershire didn't make the workshop.
Oh no, we did have representatives.
Oh right, okay,
yes,
all right.
It was just that we didn't have everybody that they'd like us to consult
right,
with. That's
fab.
why we're doing some
right.
further consultation.
How much of an issue, a problem, an urgency is it for Gloucestershire? Because obviously it's a great urgency for us, so we're really prepared to put our time and effort in. Yeah. How much of a problem is it for Gloucestershire? Have they really prioritised it as we have?
I would say on the funding side, there was a good discussion that was held in the workshop regarding potential funding sources. It is difficult at the moment for large capital schemes, any large capital transportation schemes, to get funding both within England and Wales. However, by following the guidance and the appraisal process that we're doing, we will make it compliant. So therefore, the groundwork will be done if any funding sources did become available. If this process wasn't followed, you wouldn't be able to be given the funding because you hadn't been compliant. So yeah, we will look into that. But yes, I fully appreciate your comment, which is that, yeah, there isn't much capital funding around at the moment, and Welsh Government were in the room and they did say that sources are limited. There are a few potential budgets. What we'll probably do in terms of the output of the study, again, this is something that came out of the workshop, was that we looked at smaller scale solutions and larger scale solutions. So that it might be that the conclusion of the study that there might be a need for phasing. So some of those smaller solutions, which might be things like active travel improvements, they might be things like potential small adjustments to junctions along the route, which could not have the massive impact, but could have some small scale benefit. They're more likely to be able to get funding. There's a pinch points funding category within Welsh Government which could be used, and also there's active travel funding available. So we will try within the study to have a small package maybe of more achievable things, and then a section that will be more long term for that reason.
Sorry to be...
It's fine. No, it's fine. It is a topic that came up in the workshop last week, and we did have a discussion about it. Yeah.
And just Gloucestershire, is it an issue?
Yeah, no, they're definitely very keen to see the study taken forward within their local transport plan. They do have an objective and a in there to liaise with Monmouthshire in order to take forward any potential bypass scheme. So they've actually put that in their strategy and their documentation. And we've had good engagement so far. So they do have a problem. I think anecdotal evidence at the workshop last week was that queuing on their side is just as bad. It apparently goes back as far as the entrance to the diving centre, which is... And then they have got rat running as a consequence, people going down through Tuts Hill and across the old bridge. So... And there is potential benefit for them for opening up development land. And there's the impact for them as well of the removal of the tolls, which could lead to more people moving into the Forest of Dean, South Gloucestershire area, because that then becomes commutable to Bristol. So I think it is I think it is something that they see as important to look at as well. Yeah, that's okay.
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, in relation to the Forest of Dean's interest in this week, and I don't know if Michelle would know yet, but it's been brought to my attention, there's a forest economic partnership being created at the moment, which is going to look at the longer term prosperity around the Forest of Dean, where it intends to go through its economy then generally. That has to play into this as well. And I suspect this study will be more than just Chepstow. I've said before, this is more about the southeast transport, and it may well grow in relation to that and other issues. I suspect when you start talking about, when you start discussing with our planning officers and the like, we will also be looking at road links elsewhere in the southeast and how we may be able to improve those at the same time, all which play with this. So in my perception, it is more than purely a bypass in Chepstow.
Yeah, I think it'll need to be in order to create a good strategic case for the scheme as well, to tie in with as many national and regional things that are going on both sides of the border. Yeah, to create a really good case for investment on it. Yeah.
Anybody else? Jed?
First off, sorry for being late, Chair. And sorry, Michelle Wilking, in the middle of things. I had to go and fix some IT stuff before I came here. Yeah, I mean, this all sounds like a good first thing, and I don't want to appear like I want to sit on the sidelines of the process and heckle and be involved, but I would like to see the list of the long list of options. I know that you want to just get on with the work and then produce the draft report, but it doesn't have to be something that I throw open to the wider thing. But I would like to look at those options and the possible solutions and see. Just make sure. I'm sure you've covered everything. I'm sure you have, and some of it will be stuff that I won't be thinking about as well. But I'd like to see it at this early stage. That'd be great. The Forest of Dean Economic Partnership. I've actually had some positive contact with somebody involved in that. I'm going to try and insinuate, for want of a better word myself, into that just to strengthen up our lines of communication, really, as well, so that we can do it as a guest star. And aside from the request for information, I mean, this is quite rightly a process between MCC and Gloucestershire. Is there at any point a need to involve the national sort of narrative in it, or do you want to? Are we looking to keep this because it means it? If we open it up and try and get national involvement, it might slow things down. Are we looking to keep it at a purely county level, so that we can then get them involved, or are we looking to get national involvement in it some point soon?
We did have Welsh Government at the workshop, so they're aware of the scheme, and we will be consulting with Highways England as well. Unfortunately, they couldn't make the workshop, but I'm trying to work on getting contact details to get hold of the right person to be able to consult with them. So they're the kind of national bodies we will be talking to as well at this stage, yeah.
Brilliant.
Chair, sorry. Mark Yeoman, Great Western Railway, in case you're wondering, but formerly of this parish and many other parishes. Just probably want to ask one question, because I know over in the west of England we get sort of invited along to sort of multimodal studies, but was anyone there from the rail industry representing?
There was going to be somebody from the Gloucester side that was rail industry related, but unfortunately they couldn't make it, so they're one of the people that we're going to be consulting with now, yeah, and going out to talk to them. I think it is on at the moment, this one.
Yeah.
This one's on at the moment. Yeah, that one's glowing red. I think that means it's on.
It might be worth adding, Mr. Chairman, at this moment, when we carried out the workshop last week, one of the issues which did come forward was around public transport. It's not just about roads.
Yeah.
It was around enhancing public transport in that region, be that rail or bus or whatever. So.
Yeah, and the long you mentioned the long list being available. The long list it'll be clearly shown alongside your report. You have something called the impacts assessment report, and that clearly shows the development of everything that was taken from the workshop, all the work we did. You can see the long list, you can see how it was appraised, and then it was shortened down. So all that information will be available. If that's something you'd like to see now, we're working on the output of the workshop, but I'm sure I can pass that through to Kristen, and then you can see that, yeah, because it'll be available at the end, so it's nothing to hide, so to speak. And as Roger said, that did cover an awful lot of different modes. It wasn't just focused on a highway option. Yeah.
The chief executive said to me this morning that he picked up on a news item coming in that Chester now is one of 5 of the worst air contaminated.
Yes, it is.
I've got a microphone, but I reckon I'll be able to project from here if that's okay.
Yeah.
The news article is nothing new, we know it. The Hardwick Hill, the area that you identified on that graphic earlier, I think now it comes in at number 5 in the UK.
Right, okay, yeah.
It's relatively low quality of air pollution, and that's something that we can never be proud of, but it's not new news. And I guess what I was going to say, if I may, Chair, whilst making an input, is that I guess patience is not a virtue with which I'm terribly well blessed. One thing that hasn't been mentioned this morning is pace.
Right, yeah.
And I'm interested to know whether we are making every investment that we need to make to optimise the timing of this. And I'm really interested in stage 1. But I'm more interested in stage
2, yeah, and 4, yeah.
I welcome the fact that you're looking to devise something which is got sort of, I suppose, a bit of a pick and mix feel about it to make some incremental changes. But in my heart, I believe there's an engineering solution that falls off the back of this. The work that you're doing with us, I know will be of a high technical quality. But equally, I know the reality of the work is what Councillor Becker was talking into. At the end of it, it goes into a political lobbying process. And we're not bad at that, actually, when push comes to shove. And you know, we've got people in the room today who played a large part of the 6 years in positioning an impossible project all the way to a parliamentary debate early this week. And all power to them for what they've done. So for me, I guess, pace, stage 1, the commissioning time is what?
Okay.
How soon do we move on to stage 2? And can I be assured that we've got everything lined up to maximise the pace without being reckless?
Yeah. Well, stage 1 is the very first high-level stage, so it's probably good to highlight that it is just going to be qualitative assessment at this point. The timescale for that is that we're still at the point where we're consulting with people, and I should imagine that appraisal, you know, proper full-on appraisal is going to be happening in the month of June, with hopefully some output at the end of June, beginning of July. So that's the timescale that we're working to at the moment, because we're still in a stage of trying to capture information to make sure that we've got everything that we can to make it the best study possible. The next stage, when you've got a short list of options, that's the key stage really. That's the big piece of work, because that's the first point at which you want to be gathering primary data, and it's very quantitative based, and you're going to be looking at things like value for money assessments. You might need to even invest in a transportation model if the current South East Wales transport model doesn't have the output of data that we require. So that's the large and intensive piece of work, and that could take a couple of months to progress. But obviously we're just commissioned at the moment to do the stage 1 piece of work, which we're hoping to have first outputs of by the end of June, beginning of July.
And I guess, again, my last thing would be, from my perspective, the points of drift sometimes tend to be, you know, when you get to the end of the stage 1 before you start stage 2, these things can become quite staccato.
Yeah.
I've got no interest in that in any way, shape or form. I'm looking for flow, straight, you know, this is a conversation in the room really. I'm looking for flow. I'm not looking for delay of 6 months, 9 months or 12 months. You know, my life is running out, and I want to see something happen, I think, with this. So I think that's for us to work out. I don't think we're live streaming today, are we? We are. I'll be careful with my language there. I think South Gloucestershire, the forest needs are, if anything, even more acute than ours. You know, all of the latest modelling work suggests that tolls off means anywhere between 15 and 20% more traffic.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't a problem that's going to relax.
No. No.
So I think we need to position this work as part of an opportunity for the region to position itself for the next 15 to 20 years. If we don't do this work and position it as such, then the potential benefits to our southeast quarter, they will not be realised. So this is a major strategic issue for us right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the subject of the political lobbying aspect, and what could be an unfortunate piece of timing, or it might work for us, we'll have to see. But for starters, I've got a petition with the Welsh Assembly Government about a bypass around Chepstow that's probably going to their permissions committee about mid-May. I've got to feed back on it immediately at the moment. If this committee wants to add anything into that feedback to try and get the subject onto the agenda in the Assembly, you know, please let me know and we can integrate that. Equally, I had for the 3rd time my appointment with the Secretary of State for Wales postponed as a result of talking to him about these issues at the 7 Growth Summit. But I have received an assurance that not only is he, you know, still interested, he wants to possibly come to Chepstow to talk to some of the involved parties, again, for raising some of this to a slightly higher level and preparing for that lobbying aspect of what might come out of the process. You know, it would be probably salient to have some representation from this committee there, or from the working group as well, if that goes ahead. You know, I'll keep you posted. But there are those 2 elements. They might be coming a little early for us because we don't have where we are in the study, which is a shame, but it would be up to us to maintain that momentum, I suppose. So I'll let you know those. So.
One of the keys to that will probably be trying to identify funding for the second stage, which tends to be a very costly stage of investigative work, purely because you are trying to gather primary data and you're undertaking the quantitative assessment on the shortlist. Because at this stage it's qualitative and you're using existing data, it's, you know, it's not a bigger chunk of work. What the next bit is the really big bit, and then you go on to do your final business case, which is the one single preferred option. And again, that can be quite intensive, making sure that you've created the absolute best case you can for why, you know, that scheme needs to go forward and the investment that's needed. Yeah.
Any more contributions?
Can I just, I mean, on the last point, on the costs and the various stages, just to clarify, I mean, I think it's at the end of part one, we should hopefully have a number of shortlisted options, which then can be taken forward. And this is really when you talked about engineering sites, and it's be part of stage two, where you have to look into sufficient detail to be able to give you effectively cost-benefit analysis of this. So you need to know the costs which involve to do at least an outline design for something like this. And I think stage three, the detailed things, that's really then the full design. And the names of these three stages are sometimes a bit unfortunate, because effectively after the end of stage two, you take a decision about what is going forward and what isn't, because you wouldn't spend the money on a full design without being something like this. And the assessment at the end of stage three about about the full business case is effectively revisiting the whole thing, whether as part of the full design you're going to end up with changes. And the reason why effectively that's being asked for is because there's been sufficient cases where I think people have been too optimistic when it came to the outline design change. So they've got this stage three, another review of the business case at the end of it, in case you were naughty at stage two. But that's really the key one about stage two. Yes, I think you said probably after the summer, and it was in the second half of this year, to be able to get the funding and to undertake it, to do the outline design for certain stages, and to be able to show that the cost-benefit analysis works out. So there'd be two key pieces, quite a bit of engineering design, as well as to be able to show on a quantitative assessment that these solutions stack up against both the Welsh government and the UK government's criteria. I think what you just said about going to the minister at the same time, I think that's quite right to do things, saying that we are on our way with this is being happening, and we don't have the funding allocated for stage two yet. At the moment, we don't actually quite know what it is, because we don't quite know what the shortlist of stage one is going to be. And then there might well be a couple of options which we all want to implement. We have to do different things, but that's certainly something where, if we're trying to do the seamless from stage one to stage two, we'll have to consider now, and that's worth flagging up with. I mean, so as I said, it's all been flagged up with Welsh government officers, but needs to be flagged up probably on the political level as well.
Thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, the money that we do have at the moment that are going into the study only cover stage one. Is that right? Or have we got anything budgeted for stage two?
We've only commissioned stage one so far. That's been commissioned.
Yeah, that's all. That's all that's been commissioned. It almost feels inevitable we've got to go on to stage two after stage one. So it's not, I doubt if it will be a money issue in relation to going on to that stage.
Just one point on Jez was talking about the Secretary of State and his interest. There is no doubt, because I have spoken with him as well, that he is very interested in this as a project. He sees it as crucially important to South East Wales. So we're pushing against an open door there, if you like. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Can we move on now to item number 5, which is GWR and Mark. And I'm really pleased to see you on because I didn't think you were good enough.
I'll stand up there. I haven't got a presentation, but I'll stand up there. Deja vu, I have to say, this agenda. It's got items about Chepstow, items about 3 railway stations, and items about Great Western Railway. I feel like I've gone back 4 years in time. Just following on from something that the Chief Executive, Paul, said. On the items that I was probably going to cover was about the new franchise, the new Great Western franchise, but obviously at some point this year there'll be a new Wales and Borders franchise awarded, although we know not yet what service will come out of that new franchise. But you'd like to think that there'll be something better for the Chepstow line and Abergavenny line. So it may be that, you know, there could be a very short-term sort of win to, you know, get more services on that Chepstow line, which will, you know, I think if Messrs Inskip, Flint and Hand, and particularly Phil, if Phil was here, he would remind you that when the A40 was closed into Gloucester many years ago, some additional parking was put in at Lydney station, and rail patronage on the Lydney to Gloucester line just grew because people just didn't want to be dealing with the congestion on the roads into Gloucester. So, you know, a very short-term sort of fix, you know, and I think it's continued on that, you know, and that was with the existing rail service, not actually doing anything in terms of adding any more trains. And I flagged that up because there was a consultation on our Great Western franchise which concluded a couple of months ago, which I'm sure that Monmouthshire and the regional bodies submitted their responses to, because I know people have expressed a desire to look at, you know, more direct services from Chepstow and Lydney through to Bristol. Not without its challenges, because it has to sit alongside all the other aspirations and objectives that people want in South East Wales to connect into Bristol and beyond. But, you know, at some point this year, you know, the terms of our extended franchise and whatever the Department for Transport requires off Great Western will come out. And that's again probably an opportunity to lobby your politicians, you know, to get them, you know, interested, because I know that politicians do lobby on things, and you know, we've been lobbied about new stations in South Wales, not just the one that's in Monmouthshire, but the one that's on the borders of Monmouthshire and the one that's just outside Cardiff. So, you know, lobbying and opportunities sort of, you know, through the franchise process are worthwhile, I would suggest, based on my experience. As I said, no presentation, do apologise for that. I'm just going to briefly cover a couple of sort of issues just to sort of flag up. Our train performance isn't brilliant at the moment and isn't where it should be. We'd like it to be, and having been out travelling on our trains when either they're formed of fewer carriages than they should be, or we don't run for 3 hours between London and South Wales on a weekend, it's not a nice place to be when you're dealing with people who want to get home or get to work. Variety of reasons for that. I think one of the major challenges we've got at the moment is that we are training an awful lot of our train driving crew into using the different trains that are appearing now in and around Bristol and South East Wales, be it the new Intercity Express trains, which occasionally stop at Severn Tunnel Junction, to the new trains that have come from the London and Thames Valley to provide extra capacity between Bristol and Cardiff. There's just an awful lot of train driver training going on, and they can only obviously do that when they're not operating sort of scheduled services. So some people might suggest, why wasn't this envisaged beforehand? probably a lesson for the future and lesson for future franchises, I would suggest, going forward. I think we've got over the sort of summit of the sort of hill of poor performance, but you know, we have still sort of got challenges, and we've also got the added challenge that there's an awful lot of engineering work still taking place to, you know, ensure that electrification of the main line between London and South Wales is completed by at some point in 2019. Those of you who have travelled between Cardiff and Bristol recently will have noticed that, you know, some of the trains aren't running. Some of the trains are running slightly earlier than they were normally scheduled to be, and taking slightly longer between Cardiff and Newport, and also going over bits of track that you never had experienced sort of before. There's still an awful lot of that work to, you know, to happen, and we are constantly under pressure from Network Rail in particular to sort of ensure that they have their level of access to the railway to enable that work to take place. And it's a bit of a balance, you know, between how much access you give them, which means you can't run as many trains as you would normally want to do, to you know, providing some semblance of a sort of passenger service. Again, I think there's a lot more to come in South Wales for the rest of this year, but hopefully by the middle of 2019, for electrification wise, it would all been sort of completed. The final point, and I was sort of really pleased, I haven't yet watched the video, to obviously notice the sort of parliamentary debate that Jessica Morden obtained on the Mega station, because that is probably one of the sort of other challenges that we as a train company and other train companies are facing, in that, you know, there's lots of interest about sort of new stations. There are 3 alone between the Severn Tunnel and Cardiff, obviously at Mega, 1 at Llanwern and 1 at Cardiff Parkway. Each of the parties behind them wants their trains to stop there. Some of them want, you know, the faster trains to stop there, but then equally we've got organisations who want even faster services, and will say to us, why are we stopping at X, Y, Z station? And it certainly happens at Severn Tunnel Junction when we have to stop the intercity train in the morning because the earlier train hasn't had enough carriages. I've seen tweets from people who've been on that train saying, why are we stopping there? And then I'm asked, do we still need to stop there? So I've still got my Monmouthshire gene in me, which says, yes, we do still need to stop there. And I know the people of Severn Tunnel do benefit and welcome it, but it's an interesting sort of balancing act between those who are promoting new stations which have got really strong cases behind them, to those who want us not to stop at certain stations. And equally, some people would like us not to stop at more stations in England as well, which is an even greater conundrum. So we try to find a balance, but it's I think exciting on the other hand, because there are lots of these new stations proposals sort of building up. And where I think of where stations like Mega were when I wrote a cabinet report, you know, a couple of years ago about not wanting to proceed with it, it's moved on, you know, far much further than I probably envisaged it was. But it's one of those sort of challenges at the moment, and that probably is it from me, Chair, from a Great Western viewpoint.
Yes,
looks like
Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions, Mark. Firstly, you said that the services passed the summit, I think. I don't think there's any evidence of that showing up. If you look at what's happening this week, for example. The second point you were making was that, it's hard because there are groups that want non-stop in trains, fast services, and there are others who want new stations. Well, I can tell you, I sit in both camps, one with Mega Station 1, and my wife is a regular commuter to London. Now, from my anecdotal evidence, and I'll ask you where you get your evidence and how you resolve such problems, is that, putting aside Mega, because that's out of the scope of intercity, you mentioned about some of the London trains stop at Severn Tunnel because there's been cancelled trains. Well, that's not really an argument, is it? It's what people say who travel to London, this is from my evidence, is we just want seats, we want schedules that we understand, because it doesn't matter whether they get there 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later, as long as they know when they're going to get there and they have a reliable journey. I get this all the time. So I'd be asking you, where do you get the evidence and how do you rationalise between, you know, people who want more stations and people who want to get on a fast express?
The evidence comes from sort of politicians and senior officials and senior, you know, business organisations who want faster trains, and it's difficult sometimes to sort of balance the two sort of objectives up. There's a debate going on, for example, about my local station, Neath, which, you know, is one of the busiest in South West Wales, but unfortunately is on the bit of the main railway line that curves around the river, sort of Neath. Now, there's been a lobby in Swansea to get the journey time between Swansea and Cardiff down to 30 minutes. Now, you can do that by not stopping at Neath, Port Talbot and Bridgend. Now, Swansea people would love not to stop at those places so they can get to Cardiff quicker and then on to London quicker. But, you know, there are, and I sense your frustration, Paul, because when I try to balance up and when some of my colleagues try to balance up, you know, yeah, people want faster journey times, but also the only way you can get on a train is at a station. It's a difficult one, you know, to call, you know, to call. I think, and I think I've said this before, where you've got actually a greater level of service in the first place, then you can do many more things. At the moment, Cardiff Bristol's only got a half-hourly train service, you know. So if it had a 15-minute train service between the two cities, which many cities of a comparable size have got, then you can start to do things like running fast between Cardiff and the centre of Bristol, which is what some council leaders have wanted in the last couple of years. But then you can also start to serve the local stations sort of, you know, in between. It happens though up in the London and the Thames Valley, you know. Didcot, exactly the same, where we want to take out stops of those services. South Wales services all stop largely at Didcot Parkway, for example. You know, woe betide us if we ever wanted to take out even more stops on the West of England services, because the Didcot travelling sort of public would be up in arms. Maidenhead, exactly the same when we want to take out stops on there. And trying to find a balance is, you know, difficult. And I've been doing this probably now in various guises for about 17 years, and I still haven't cracked it in terms of how you satisfy one person without annoying another. I think though, at the Severn Economic Summit, somebody did point out a really valid point about journey times, and perhaps we have got a little bit too fixated on journey times, and it's actually having facilities on the trains that enable people to make best use of those, you know, journeys times that they got. So that on Cardiff Bristol at the moment, we haven't got, you know, full power supply for people to plug their laptops in. The Wi-Fi isn't brilliant. On our new Intercity Express trains, everyone can plug in their laptop, you know, for example, and work happily on it. And that means then that the journey time that, you know, on many of our services and on our Uber services at the moment is largely redundant because you can't access Wi-Fi and you can't plug in your laptop, becomes less of an issue. And I think it was an interesting point made because it was a reminder for some of us, you know what, journey times, you know, I'm a strong believer that rail is much better for longer distances and even shorter distances because it beats doing it in the car, and you can do many more things on the train than you can ever do in the car. But, you know, we will still have a debate ongoing about, you know, do you want to have fast journeys, which normally the rail industry requires you not to stop at stations, or do you want to stop at more stations to increase your patronage?
Yeah, I just come back. I think what I would be doing in your position is going back and challenging councils and other bodies. Say, you sure that's not baggage and an old requirement that you just simply carrying through? Because I think, as you made the point quite rightly, with Wi-Fi and power points on trains, as I say, my wife doesn't mind whether it's a 3 hour or a 3 hour and a 20-minute journey because she's working, and that's all that matters really, and obviously to have a seat. But yeah, I think I'd go back and challenge hard the councils. I don't know where we get our information on passenger requirements compared to local and intercity travel, for example. But anyway, that's it. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
I don't know, but we'll find out where we do get our information from. Okay, Debbie.
It's really going along those lines, because actually when you're trying to find that balance and working out where your focus should be, I guess my question would be to Welsh Government, what kind of public transport are they looking for? What is their vision? So is their vision to have the few getting to their destination 2 minutes faster, or is it to have an integrated public transport system which is affordable and access to all? I'd go for the latter, really. Have they got a vision statement on what they want for the public transport? Do you know?
I might pass that to some of my former ex-local government colleagues. I think they've got to find a balance though between people who do want and who do lobby strongly for faster journey times, certainly between London and the southeast and South Wales. And theoretically, the only way you can do that is to not stop at all of the stations in England. You know, so that's literally to go non-stop after you go through the tunnel through. And I've done it once or twice when our train's been heavily delayed. You know, and that's not stopping at Bristol Parkway, Swindon, Reading, straight through. But then you lose all the links to like the employment opportunities at Bristol Parkway, for example. You lose at Reading and Didcot, the links up to Oxford, you know, and there's a strong academic link. You use the links at Reading down to the Gatwick and the Heathrow airports just to get to London quicker. And yeah, I think, Paul, it's a good challenge for those of us who at the moment are within the rail industry, and when some of us leave the rail industry, we might want to challenge it even further by saying, look, faster journey times. As I said before, I'm a strong believer. And at the moment, some of the journey times that exist between London and the southeast, and Cardiff and Bristol, are way better than you can ever do on the car. And I do test it, do a compare and contrast. But there still seems to be fixation on, we want to get 90 minutes to Cardiff or Newport. Yeah, we do. But at the moment, the journey time between London and Newport on a train, even with a stop at Seven Tunnel Junction, is way quicker than you would ever do it in a car reliably.
I mean, my understanding is from discussions with the Welsh Government that they do want both. Both into Bristol and into London, i.e. they want faster journey times as well as connections to the intermediate places. I think their priority is on faster journey times to the key destinations. That does make it a bit difficult, but I think the situation, this thing is that we can have effectively both, because obviously the local authorities in the west of England, they also want to have trains to London. Obviously you've got faster trains from South Wales. If it wouldn't stop there, they would have their own ones which have to go somewhere. So in this case, I think it's something which we are trying to tell both the government and the rail industry that's actually something which is deliverable. I've got much traction with it yet. Transport for Wales seems to be agreeing with us, but they don't seem to be doing anything about it, so we'll have to wait and see.
Oh God. Can I come back just quickly?
And then, sorry.
Just quickly come back.
All right. Okay.
I suppose my concern is the Welsh Government, and it's not just in transport, they seem to go for sort of a soundbite or quick win outcomes, like shiny new, oh, look what we've done. And being the fastest is easier to go, yeah, you're fabulous, rather than just having a really good infrastructure, which is probably slightly harder to measure and to show how good they are. So I suppose my question is, if we cannot have both, which way would they lean towards? And I suspect it is just the fastest, which is disappointing, really.
So can I just clarify this? Yes, they're looking into city things. Within South East Wales, they're actually quite good at understanding about an integrated network, about the metro, and that includes connections to Bristol. unfortunately, if you are thinking about direct service to London from Somerset Junction, that's a bit on a limb somewhere, because it doesn't fit in anywhere with the metro. It doesn't fit into better service to Bristol. It doesn't fit into faster service from South Wales to London. We have trying to convince him, and I think the only way forward is just to try it out and see if it works, but to see whether it's going to happen.
Great.
As far as the politicians are concerned, their interest is in fast transport for themselves, because if you take that North Wales route down, the early morning route down into Cardiff, I was at the meeting the other day, an Age Cymru meeting, and a person on that meeting had got from Denbighshire to Cardiff faster than I could get from Gilwan to Cardiff on the bus system. So that shows you where the interest it lies, or with the air transport from Valley down to the south as well. So I would think on the political front, you're fighting a big battle to get, more stops involved there.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of things. I mean, I was at your GWR customer panel the other week, and I came out with more sympathy for the situation that has led to your poor performance. But I do have to say, I mean, if I read the graph right, the actual amount of trains that arrived on time was something like 44% in the last period, and that is just, that's astonishingly poor. So I don't think it's a summit. I think it's a trough. And I think you're bouncing along the bottom at the moment. But I do have sympathy. A lot of the reasons that you've ended up in that place were not yours. There have been technological reasons as well. The Hitachi chains not being able to couple and change their update their booking systems, things like that. That sounded like something that could have been easily avoided. When you do have a great service, those long journey times, as opposed to short journey times, there was a service for a little while when the Severn Tunnel was shut, where we had a long way round service from Chepstow to Bristol, which was exceptionally popular because people didn't mind the journey time as long as they could get the journey. They could do it in one leap, and they could do their work while they were there. Now, we're talking about an argument between, is it journey times, or, do we want shorter journey times, or do we want more services? The kicker is Chepstow has neither. So, we need some kind of solution. And I think if that's longer journey time, but a more reliable service that allows us to go direct to Bristol, we would be very interested in people like GWR providing that for us. And whilst I did mention that, I think it's Martin, the director, who was at the...
Matthew.
But his only sort of comment was, well, you should probably talk to, the Bristol metro system and see what their intention is, because they're trying to spin out up to Gloucester. But I see that as being a bit impossible for us to entice them over to their metro system over to our side when we're already part of Cardiff's metro system. All I'm saying to you is that, apart from let's improve that performance, if there is a way to put that longer journey time service direct to Bristol in through Cardiff stations, people will use it. So.
Thank you. Could I just ask you a question, Mark? You probably know that we through the Indies, survey the times and services in the West Country and in South Wales. And there does seem to be a pattern that when South Wales is doing pretty well, the services in the South West are not very good. And that goes on for a little while, and the thing seems to reverse. And we get a period where the services for us are not very good, and they are better for the South West. It seems to indicate a resource problem. Is it actually crewing? Is it the number of transport units that you have available? Is it servicing? Because I know that's been an issue with the number of staff you've got available to do the job. But there is a pattern where it alternates. And you have a period where it's great. You have a period where it's absolute rubbish.
It's all of them. because as Jez, we had our customer panel last week, and our director, was I hope honest with all the people in the room about all the challenges that we've got. Some of which are perhaps we could have foreseen them. Some of which are external to us, be they the new trains that we got from Hitachi, and there was a balance between do you put them in service with still some tweaks to be made to them, or do you wait until they're 100% perfect and then put them in. Decision was made to put them in with still tweaks going on about the software not sort of completely working, or dare I say the air conditioning sort of not working as well. But on the whole, when you've got a 10 car or a 5 car train, you've got oodles more capacity than you've got on a sort of HST. The delays in bringing the trains up from the Thames Valley alongside the new trains coming in have also coincided with some of our engineering staff who are based at our depots, be it at Old Oak Common, which is closing this summer. The one at Landor is closing. Now the people who used to work there are obviously either working there until the end of the depot and then retiring or leaving the railway completely, or they're finding other employment, and that has been a factor at all of our engineering depots, that staff, because of the way the new trains are maintained and procured, are not sort of procured at some of our main depots anymore, and are procured like at Stoke Gifford. So we've had people move there. There's also the staff training, of our drivers, and that's why I talked about the summit. I think the performance, because I noticed again today, 1 Foxtrot 05, my favourite train, 7:30, Cardiff Portsmouth, was 3 Vice 10. Do apologise talking railway language, but I'm well into my railways after 3.5 years now. So we put the HST stop in there. That, that's happened way too many times these last 3 months, if not longer, and it shouldn't sort of be happening in an ideal world. And there's a balancing act between the demands in the southwest, which is Devon and Cornwall, to the Bristol suburban area, in terms of when we have not enough fleet available to us to run the train service in terms of number of carriages, who takes the hit? It's why we have contingency plans. But I have a log twice a day on what our train fleet position sort of is, and the hits, in terms of where trains are formed, the fewer carriages than they should be, is generally spread across sort of the network. But then at some point you'll get the Bristol, our staff who are working around Bristol just say, look, we have got severe challenges around Bristol if we've just got like a 2-car train when it should be a 5-car train, or a 1-car train when it should be a 2-car train. So that's when Bristol gets a little bit more focused. But then the Devon and the Cornwall, we got trains which equally leave people behind in Exeter going down towards sort of Plymouth and Newton Abbot. And then there's a bit of a shift in terms of, well, we need to protect sort of that. It's not a good position for any of us to be in, particularly when you come to talk with sort of stakeholders, but also when you're out there dealing with customers sort of face to face and you can't actually get them a space on a train. And I come away sometimes very disillusioned, and I think, this is not sort of not good at all, because equally I'm passionate about railways and transport in general, and I think railways can be doing a whole heap more, and for many journeys are the best way to travel. I like driving, but I don't really like driving in congested traffic or when it's raining and somebody else at the front of the vehicle, be it bus or train, best way of travelling for me. So that when I'm out there dealing with customers, it is hard when you have to say to them, sorry, but we haven't got a train up to London for the next 3 hours. It happened after an event at Cardiff when we had no train, after one of the Six Nations events, no trains up to London for 3 hours. And I was asked, could I take a train up to London, being the rear 5? And it was a toss-up. Do I stand on Cardiff station with 200 angry Italian rugby fans, dealing with them who want to get back to London, or do I help man a train? I helped man the train, got back to Paddington about 10:30 in the evening with no idea how I was going to get back to sort of South Wales. But it was that, it was a sort of toss-up. But it wasn't a nice position to be in, but hopefully it will sort of improve, because I think railways, as I said, have got, you know, much going for them, and it's not where we as a company and many of my colleagues and many of our directors want us to be.
Could I just ask one more question then? There is also the issue, is there not, about the servicing of the HSTs and the servicing of the Hitachi trains. And there is now, Hitachi are really advertising very hard to get engineers involved to maintain their trains. And that is draining away from the HSTs, where they are dirtier and old technology and all that sort of thing. So you've got the new trains eating away, if you like, at the ability of the HSTs to service. Now, I don't know how you're going to square that, but the thing that really interests me is how long, I think the only way this thing is going to come right is when the HSTs are gone, if you like, and you're running virtually a whole Hitachi fleet. That would give us some idea of how long we're going to have to put up with the sort of problems that we're suffering from, and as you say, you are suffering from as an employer. How long are we going to be in this situation? Because I think we really ought to know that.
I think at the moment, the full IET service will come into operation in the summer of 2019. That's later than it was this time last year. It was going to be the end of this year that all the IETs and all and then the HSTs would have departed from the sort of Great Western sort of network. So, Chair, at the moment, I'd say May 2019, sort of hopefully before, but it's something that we always envisaged would happen in terms of the crossover between the old trains, you know, either going to Scotland or being used for sort of something else in the west of England, to the new trains coming in. But because of some of the sort of delays to the wider engineering process and the fact that, you know, Hitachi's new trains couldn't be tested at the time that they should have been sort of tested, that kind of handover period has just got sort of morphed and is not where it should be. So standing here now, I would say May 2019. I say that because that's based on the sort of current information. I'd like to think, and as I probably won't be in the rail industry in May 2019, that it will be like that, because I've said it, and because I think I hope, very passionate about the rail industry, that it will be like that. Because I do genuinely think that the newer trains and the new trains are a step change sort of up, but there's still some pain to go yet. Some of which, you know, particularly to do with the staffing, are things that possibly we should be doing more with, because it's not a brilliant situation in any stretch of the imagination where on a Saturday and Sunday we are not running trains up to London for 2-3 hours. You know, I can't defend that.
Thank you, Mark. I think we've had you on the rack for long enough now, and we've had enough gruel ourselves for a little while now. So thanks for coming, and I appreciate you.
Chair, if I may, if there are future meetings of this group, which GWR are invited to attend, I probably won't be the person attending them, because I'll probably be leaving them in a couple of weeks' time. So, off to do new ventures.
I'm sure we wish you well as a committee. We've been very grateful for your support, even after you left to go on this venture with the rail. So I hope things go well for you, and thank you for what you've done for us.
council may want to consider at some point in time codifying as our policy position. So, as an individual, in terms of what I've heard, is quality and reliability more important to us as a council than speed? I suspect so. Is inclusivity more important to us than exclusivity? I suspect so. Now, I'm not sure we've actually got a clear position on that. Now, it's all about going to moan, but sometimes you just got to stake your ground and position yourself. We might want to think about that over the course of the next few weeks. And the other one is a mystery that I think I just like some insight in terms of resolving. And it was the issue brought before by Councillor Becker. I quite like that notion of we ain't got no service, so we're not worrying about the speed. But actually trying to break the rail mystery of who is the right person to speak to actually try and codify a Chepstow to Bristol service. It's either a deep, dark science, or it's just little weird. I won't continue the sentence. You can connect these first two items very straightforwardly. A growing town like Chepstow, and it will grow, servicing a wider hinterland, both Gloucestershire and Monmouthshire, needs the ability to direct connect to Bristol. Whether that takes 5 minutes or an hour, I think is not the issue. The issue is, I think that's what citizens want. So I think we need to find a way of compellingly advocating for that argument. And I think that does tie to the really two policy positions. So that's possibly a conversation that the committee, they want to pick up with a cabinet member at some point in time. And we just codify where we stand on this, because I'm not sure we clearly have. So it's something to think about.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Just for the record, we have got a tentative agreement for a trial service running from Chepstow in the morning business hours to get people direct to Bristol, and the same business hours to bring them back from Bristol to Chepstow and Lydney, and that is helping the case. We're still pushing to get that implemented, but there is a basis for agreement on that, and it's down to us to push and get there. Thank you.
Chair, I just want, if I could make a suggestion, really, sort of really on the lines of Paul Matthews there. I think he's absolutely right in a way. I'm sort of saying, what's the Welsh Government's vision then? Well, what is our vision? What do we want for Monmouthshire? What do we think our citizens, if you like, want? Is this worth, maybe, could we do something to take this to full council for debate and to get sort of a decision on what... Yeah.
Proposed policies.
Yeah. So we could present them with a proposed vision and policy for discussion in full council. Something like that.
I think that's a good idea, but we have Brian behind, and he is our director of affairs. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that, Brian, is there?
I just wonder what Christian had his hand up for a while.
Christian.
I mean, yes, the council obviously has got its local transport plan, which sets out some objectives. In terms of priorities, one of the key issues is that the priorities change as things change. When we voted, reliability was actually quite good, so it wasn't really a priority. Yes, now I think it's fair to say there is a bigger issue than it was a few years ago. Therefore, it's much more a priority. In the same way, I think our first objective is safety, which is a very important objective. But at the moment, certainly on the railways, it's not a priority because it really isn't an issue. Remember, you might go back 20 years ago when they had a number of crashes and something like this. So that's really the first thing. So it's difficult to nail your priorities like this down because you react to events. The other key thing, and certainly about rail services, is that as the chair said, we've got our views in here, and communicating them to stakeholders is one thing, getting them to act on that one is something else. I mean, we are talking every now and so often with Metro West, with the West of England Combined Authority in Bristol, and with Gloucestershire and the other councils about there. So what we want is quite lined up. I think one of the key problems there is that they have got other priorities as we have. If you go, for example, to the West of England, to saying is, yes, they are quite happy with having they want to have a fast service to Cardiff as well as a stopping service, a half-hourly stopping service to Patchway, which obviously gives us a half-hourly into Severn Junction, which enables us to have trains from Chepstow reversing Severn Junction. So it all works up. But from them, getting a better local service to Patchway is something which they want, but it's not their biggest priority compared to Portishead, the Severn Beach line or something like this. And this is really where I think it's very difficult to deal with. For us, Chepstow into Bristol is something really important. For them, it's something which they're all in favour of, but it's more nice to have. And that's somewhere where I think we've been struggling at the moment, together with, dare I say, Transport for Wales saying that, we look into this once we've got the franchise out of the door. The Wage government originally looked into getting service into Bristol as part of the Wales franchise, and I think the First Minister has publicly stated that all services which start in Wales should be commissioned by the Wage government, but they couldn't get agreement on that one with the UK government. In fact, my understanding is that they still haven't formally agreement to transfer the Valley Line, the tracks for the Valley Lines, and they still haven't got formal agreement for the Wage government to be the franchising authority. They've got an interim agreement to sign off the franchise, but not really to manage Network Rail in Wales for the next few years as it requires. So this has all just been dragging on for a while, and certainly what we have been told as officers are saying is that once they've got this, they're going to look into service of Bristol, they're going to look at God knows what the other, and we were told probably about 2 years ago, it's going to happen within the next 6 months. It hasn't happened. We probably haven't been good enough over the last year as a council to put the pressure on our partners and to be quite clear where they stand. We'll probably have to revisit this, but it's not that we're not trying at all.
Well, I didn't actually reply to that point about the Chepstow, because it's something we put on when the tunnel was closed a couple of years ago. I think I passed Christian a note sort of referencing, and he made reference to it about Metro West, which is the sort of West of England sort of metro type sort of network, which originally was just really going to go to the North Bristol sort of freeway, but now it has to go somewhere else. And it's where sort of what their priorities are, but there are equal challenges in places like Yate and Cannon Dursley, in terms of wanting people to sort of travel in more services for there. So I think at the moment the last thinking is that those Metro West services, which were originally just going to be in the Bristol area, are now probably going to go up to Gloucester. Once it's in Gloucester, where then do you take them? So I think it's a discussion. If I was suggesting to you as if I was an officer perhaps in Christian's boat, or in a couple of weeks' time a independent sort of transport consultant, here's what I would be suggesting, because my experience has been those who shout loudest through like West England, and then those who lobby the DFT, do get what they sort of ask for. But I think one of the challenges will be is that when it crosses a border where from one country to another, it's what other sort of priorities. Because I think fees, from a feasible point of view, you could stop more trains at say a new station at Major if you had more services down the Chepstow line, for example. And if some of those more services down the Chepstow to Gloucester line come from somewhere but north of Cheltenham, then you've got your solution.
Okay, we've given this a fair hammering, I think. There's three more people want to speak. Jazz, Roger, Sheila.
Chair, can you just confirm for me when you say we've got a tentative bead on trying to do the direct service, is that with Arriva, is it? Or the tentative, you say we've got a tentative agreement or to try and do a direct service through to Bristol in working hours. Who's that direct agreement with?
Well, yeah,
because here's
I can see my colleague across there beginning to giggle. I think I'm probably in deep stuff here. Where are we with the direct service into Bristol in the mornings and out in the evenings?
We had agreement from Great Western Railways, from Arriva Transrails, from all the bidders that they're going to look into it. They all thought that's something. No, they all said that's something which they're interested in, and one of the bidders actually specifically come back to us and to said something. They'll check whether they can do it, and they came back to us and says doesn't look like they're going to be. Can't include it as a base franchise because they went back to Transferred Rails and it isn't in the whole thing. So we don't have we have good interest from them as well. And I mean in terms of Great Western Railway, I think it's fair to say that when electrification was still all fine, yes, we had I think Mark and his colleagues quite clearly saying this is something which they're going to test. That was a while ago. Things have moved on, and I think it's particular because of that. None of the changes which we expected to have happened by now, both in terms of Welsh government and UK government agreement, and I think in terms of electrification, have led to the fact that we aren't any further, and have led to everybody to being extremely cagey about making any commitments other than that's something which we're going to look into. So I'm very sorry that's the way it is.
It's almost laughable, isn't it?
Very tentative.
I think that's about as tentative as the word tentative gets. Just as an update, because I'm not fully aware, I don't know if other members are, but where are we on the franchise awarding? I'm trying not to say the word debacle, but the Rails and Borders one, my understanding is that the franchise will be awarded at the end of May. There will then be a 2-week standstill period, so there will be a formal announcement. There'll be a formal announcement in effectively the first half of June. All bidders have been asked whether they'd be happy to attend meetings of the Regional Transport Authority. In addition to this, we are trying to set up meetings on an officer level to talk about to get a bit of a detailed understanding about which is where we're going, and also about any delivery of any things which have to be jointly delivered. It's probably worth pointing out that we've talked to all the bidders and we have signed some confidentiality agreement of some of the things they've told us, but I think it's quite easy to say that one of the things which Abellio has told us, which obviously no longer in the running, was that they're going to really push with Mega Station, which is the reason why I think the Mega Group was quite unhappy with when Abellio dropped out. But that was effectively the agreement which we had with Abellio, to saying that they're going to do some serious work, which we have to do something together with them. And this is something which we're doing together, trying to work together with neighbouring councils to see what we're going to do this. We really have to wait and to see what those things is. As soon as
the announcement is we'll hopefully provide further information about what we know at the moment, and we'll hopefully have meetings with them about what that means in practice. But that's all we can say at the moment.
Okay, I really want to move this.
Can I just come back and summarise from those 2 points then? Jeff?
Well, 2 sentences.
Essentially, if we have our vision sorted, then we know what we want, and in 2 months' time, we're going to know where the pressure point is and who to go to. You know, admittedly, it's after the franchise has been awarded when we could have done more wrangling. But if we have those 2 things aligned, then we've got some scope for doing something. But we need our vision sorted to apply that pressure.
You're happy enough with that?
Yeah. Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, we haven't got a vision, have we? So we've been going through this conversation, sparked by who do you talk to about Chepstow, and I wrote down Bristol Metro or Bristol West Metro West. Yeah, thank you very much. Cardiff Metro, Cardiff Region Transport for Wales, the new franchise GW. I don't even know what GWR's got to do with Chepstow, but hey-ho. You just seem to talk to everybody, and I think coming back to it, we haven't particularly got a policy or vision around transport, and perhaps, as Paul was suggesting, that's a piece of work we need to do. And it's, yeah, all right, is it regular, slow, fast? We can pick up on that. I think we also need to pick up on it being a county strategy. I haven't got this love affair with trains quite as you have, because I live in Monmouth. So I think we need to look at a strategy for the county as well. So that might include buses. You're going to talk about buses briefly later on, I suspect. But we'll have to pick up on, I briefly mentioned to Christian, where are we with the local transport plan? That's due for renewal, what, 2020, did you say? Anyway, whatever it is, we can do an interim piece of work around that. And I think that's perhaps the useful piece of work to have available. As much as anything, perhaps to use as it sets out our position and therefore becomes our document to push in front of others as things are developing. I'm not 100% sure what the CCRTA and Transport for Wales, what their direction is. If you've got a direction, perhaps that benefits by, well, at least we can see what they want to do. Well, let's work in there. So I think that's a piece of work we will discuss separately about looking at how we bring that back to yourselves before council. And then, to council to say this is a policy and strategy which we want to put in front of you and which we can then use as and when we are, or you are, true to the point, as members then lobbying in other places.
No, Sheila next. Sheila?
I found this discussion very interesting. I mean, the issues regarding, Mr. Youngman mentioned regarding GWR's issues. There's lots of different companies, obviously. It's a vast subject, it covers a large area. But I'm sitting here thinking about customer satisfaction, what do people want, and we've come around to that now at the end, thinking about what we want as a council, as a vision. Is it worth examining or thinking about, we've got my Monmouthshire, we've got under Democratic Services, we're going to have a working group looking at engagement, public engagement. Is it worth now thinking about that as a start with regard to what our customers want, what our residents want? I mean, obviously every rail franchise has got its own customer satisfaction avenue, the way they consult with people. Can we do it as a council to fit in with our vision, that we start consulting? As I say, Matigatos is doing some work with public engagement. Could we look at that just to see if it could fit in with this vision?
I sit on the same committee with you, and I hear what you say. Would you like to comment on that, Roger?
Consultation. If we're going to have an an effective vision, strategy and document which we can support, it will have to include consultation. I only hesitate in how we structure that, and I think that's a piece to come back to you with, because you consult with me, I'd like a half-hour service by rail from Monmouth. Next week would be fine, thank you very much. And we've got to manage that consultation in terms of aspirations and what can be achieved. The piece of work to do around that, it is an essential piece of work. It would form part of any vision and strategy going forward, because that's what we're here for. But I'm just early on thinking, how do we manage that quite? Because you asked, the other thing while I'm on it is we've adopted 22 for 22 as well. And in that, I'm sure, I recall, it's probably item number 19, is to improve rural transport within Monmouthshire. So we've already got that down as a priority for Monmouthshire. And where our struggle is to link that to tangibly, what does that look like? And what is affordable? And how do we optimise Monmouthshire's position, working with where the money, what money is, like the capital region, or Cardiff Metro, and the new franchise, whoever that might be. And it is a bit like treading through treacle. It's a job to know which way to go, but that, nevertheless, I think for Monmouthshire, we need that document in place.
Great.
Can I just come up?
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say this could be a project for that working group. Yeah. You know, it won't be all of it, but it could be a part of it.
Okay. Great. The rural transport study, though, that was done at the end of the year, the consultation, brought together virtually all the county-wide transport issues, and it brought together all the potential, or a lot of the potential solutions that could come. So that obviously gives you a basis for putting your strategy together, I would have thought, wouldn't it? At least for much of the country. I don't know how much. I was mainly involved in the health side of it, but I don't know how much discussion there was on rail, but I know that the 300 or 400 points came out of that issue of concern, and another lots of points of potential solutions to that. I mean, that doesn't go to the question of how these solutions are actually ever going to be implemented, but at least it gives you a basis perhaps of looking for, on a county-wide basis, a transport strategy.
Yeah, quite right. That piece of work is done, and it's a valuable piece of work and something we have to refer back to. I think there's a stage after that, though, in terms of, well, what does delivery look like? Exactly. And that's where it starts to get a little bit more challenging about, well, this is what we'd like, so what can we afford and what can we do? I'm perhaps more around the rural element than the train element, actually, at the moment, is in my mind. But yeah, a piece of work which can't be lost. I'm
saying, I was at a meeting, our council meeting, and there was, shall we go out to engagement? I said, we've already engaged 3 times. Yeah. So you can keep going on engagement, but ultimately you have to come up with a strategy and try to deliver that strategy.
Thank you, Greg. We're going to move on now. Item number 6, Christian, the Cardiff Capital Region Transport Authority update.
Yes, thank you. I can keep this short. We've got this running item on the agenda to report back about what's been done on the Cardiff Capital Regional Transport Authority. There has not been a RTA board meeting since the last time we met. The last RTA board meeting was in January. There is now a workshop planned for... There was originally another meeting planned for April. This has been delayed. There's now a workshop planned in mid-May. I haven't seen an agenda yet, so I'm afraid there is no further update. We'll let you know when we know. Oh, sorry. The only one thing is just saying that it does sound a bit like a lack of progress, and yes, there has been a bit of a lack of progress, and there are proposals going to chief execs, I think, on Friday for bringing back resources to the RTA, but again, I don't quite know where this is going, and once we know, we can let you know.
Thank you, Christian. Active travel development. I think there's some news there, is there?
Yes, hot off the press, I think last time we discussed the Monmouthshire integrated network maps, which we had to submit to change deadline of end of February, which we did do, and they have now been approved by Welsh Government. So the council now has got official future walking cycling networks for the 7 towns, which we now have to work to implement. That also means we are going to now have 175,000 to spend this financial year on developing plans. Officers are planning to meet within the next few weeks about trying to see how we're going to take this forward. If there are any specific recommendations by members of this group, please let me know, because we effectively have got a year to spend quite a bit of money. That's the first point. Second point, also on active travel, we did get some Welsh Government local transport funding towards the Abergavenny Town Centre works, the public realm improvements for the next stage. So that's quite useful. We got the next stage is going to be obviously delivered this financial year, about £300,000 worth of funding. We failed to get any money for the Abergavenny Landforest Bridge proposal. However, we have, well, I've just literally been informed by Welsh Government that they are going to allocate another 60 million towards active travel over between now and 2021. That's additional money. There's an active travel conference in Wrexham on the 17th of May when the Minister will make an announcement about how this money is being allocated. Clearly from an MCC point of view, the Abergavenny Landforest cycle bridge would be our first priority, because we've lost out and is effectively ready to deliver when we've got the funding. That's really the situation with active travel. And as I said, if you've got any specific suggestions about what else we need to prioritize in terms of developing things, let me know.
Just to sorry. Just to clarify, Christian, obviously they have to relate to the routes on the maps. So.
Well, yes.
So having a suggestion, yeah, it's bound to be me, isn't it? Looking at the active travel, I'm really glad that we've got them. The active travel stuff is great, and it is mostly for moving people around for the purposes of getting to places for work, school, and those kind of things, safe journeys. When we talked about this last time, what came out from a couple of other members that there are various sort of aspirational cycle routes across the county which aren't particularly for that purpose, but are for more of a tourism purpose. I would like to see us try and get, again, it's about a bit of a unified vision. You know, if we knew, I mean, two of those schemes I knew nothing about. I can't even remember them now, but because they're in other parts of the county from my own, and I was concerned with the multi-use path from Tintern to Chepstow. But if we could somehow, can we use any of this money to put together a plan for a more tourism-based cycle path network in the county? Something that I think we would do well to aspire to with the, with my economic tourism hat on.
I think there has been one in the past, actually. Was it?
Is that so, Dick? I'm not aware. Do you want to answer that, Roger, or Christian?
Well, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
My recollection, and I didn't study the detail of the active travel plan. I saw the plans. They were intended to get people from A to B, from school to work to town, whatever it was. To then use that funding to develop tourism routes does seem a little obtuse to me, I'd have to say at the moment. Complementary, potentially. I suppose the matter we'll pick up there, we have to put together a programme of how we're going to spend that. The point's been raised. If something can be considered as part of that, but rather than give any commitment at this moment, I would suggest we do that at that time, because we also have to have ways by which we can spend that money, presumably within the next 12 months. Is it? So
11.
11. So I know it doesn't sound very likely, but spending money can sometimes be difficult on the short term. But we will consider it.
Dick.
Yeah, I think people who have an interest in the urban routes might be rather unchuffed if they saw it being frittered away on yet another study of rural routes for tourism benefits, because that's not what it was about. It's about getting people out of their cars for journeys to work, etc. No, I just wanted a little bit of clarification that I can pass on to local contacts from Christian. If the bridge is delayed, which is clearly going to happen, and we're not entirely surprised about that, the priority that we were going to give in Abergavenny to the connecting routes through some of this 175,000, would it be your advice that we actually postpone that, or perhaps that we get that done ahead of the bridge construction? Which is rather assuming that a bridge sometime is going to be built, which I suppose is taking a bit of a risk, but I doubt it, considering the amount of money that's been spent so far.
I think now is very much a time to develop the link routes to the linkages to the bridge to such a degree that we can actually ask for funding to implement it in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Answer I wanted.
Thank you. Next item 8, rail station progress, Abergavenny, Chepstow, Mega 7 tunnel. If Kristen, you take Abergavenny, Chepstow and 7 tunnel, and Paul will update us on the Mega development.
Okay, Abergavenny and Chepstow, again, one of the local transport fund funding which we got is money to buy land next to the station for the purpose of building interchanges. In Abergavenny, I think the primary site which we're looking at is the builders unit opposite the station building. In Chepstow, obviously, there are quite a number of possible sites, and it doesn't really matter which one. So we've got the funding this financial year to do this. The next step would be then to, I mean, there's already been planning work done in the past, so that wasn't really the issue. Although obviously no detailed plans, but at the moment it's stored for lack of funding and for lack of land. So hopefully we do the land bit. In terms of Severn Tunnel Junction, there's also a regional local transport fund grant which actually went across the region to develop metro-related schemes. We got a bit of money to take the car park on the south side of Severn Tunnel Junction forward out of this pot last year, and I'm optimistic that we'll do the same this financial year. The aim in Severn Tunnel Junction would be at the end of the year or some stage during the year, even ideally, we'd be in any position to have secured planning permission and have got all the plans that we can then go out to tender and deliver the car park extension on the south side. as said before, in terms of Abergavenny and Chepstow, we're a bit further off, because once we've got the land, we'll have to relook at we don't at the moment have any funding for detailed design, and while we've got a grant of about $500,000 for buying the land, at the moment I've got no idea how much it actually cost us. Estates are working on it, but we haven't got. We've got good noises from some of the landowner, but we've got no agreement. So that's how far it's with them two stations.
Thank you, Christian. Paul. Oh, sorry. Sheila.
Just a question regarding the Abergavenny interchange. I mean, you've mentioned that some progress has been made with this. Could you send us the details? I would like to see what information you have to date regarding what plans have been put together for this. And well, how long do you think this is going to take to progress? You've just got the money to buy the land at the moment, I think.
So the previous work is effectively 2006 and 2011 studies looking at this type of things. That was accepted by Welsh government as effectively sufficiently making the case for them us giving the funding. In our bid, effectively said we've done the basic case has been made. If you go back to our presentation, for example, it was the WellTech function slightly different then, but effectively the equivalent of WellTech stage 1 case has been made, so we know what we want to going to do, and that's really how it is. I can get you, I can make sure that you get copies of these studies. They are way above 10 megabytes each, so they're usually got problems with my computer, but I can see what we can achieve. We haven't really done any other work. The next stage, I think, which we ought to do this year, which isn't too difficult, is to do a consultation on the proposals for Abergavenny Station. I would want to wait until I've spoken to the franchise winner, because quite a bit of the work which needs to be undertaken will involve touching the live railway. That's something which I think, as Paul and Ted can vouch for, is something not easy. We're struggling with this in Mega. If that can be done by the next franchise operator, because they have to do this on a day-to-day basis anyway, we'd be much better. So yes, I would hoping that at some stage during this year we'll be able to have some sort of had a better idea about what the options are beyond this, and do a public consultation on this type of thing, and hopefully get some funding from somewhere to take it further forward.
So this is going to be quite a long process, is what you're saying. Also, has this money got to be spent within a certain time scale, like with the other funding that you've had?
Well, the money which we've got to buy the land, which has to spend this financial year. But I mean, realistically, if you don't manage to buy the land in 11 months, then I mean, what are we kidding about?
Just ancillary to the issue of the buying of the land, Christian, are we any further forward on the our favourite disability bridge? So other than what we know, oh, you were going to ask anyway.
Can I refer the question to the Abergavenny Town Centre clerk? I don't have an overview. I know there's been quite a bit of activity, but I haven't really been kept ahead of this type of thing. Sorry, I know that the Town Centre clerk is trying to keep an overview as well, and it's just a bit of shared work, so to speak.
Yeah, just to clarify that a bit, I mean, there was a meeting between Network Rail and the Town Council, and my understanding of that meeting was that Network Rail's implied that there was no difficulty in them preparing a scheme for amending the signalling, which is the obstruction to the construction of a new pedestrian bridge, out of context of a much wider signalling scheme. And it seemed to the message that meeting got, I think, was that everybody had to look to the county council, and the town council would do that themselves, to get together pressure on whoever would pay for that study, which might be Welsh Government, but also the application to the Department for Transport to get it into the programme to build the bridge if you can solve the signalling problem. So it requires quite a lot of integration to make this all work, and yet it's a very big local issue. And Brian said he would get involved at the last meeting. It really does need pushing on, otherwise I can just see it all frittering away with excuses like, well, until we can talk to the franchise operator. That will become important, I'm sure, but it would be nice if somebody was doing this engineering study to see precisely what it would cost to sort out the signalling.
Sheila?
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that, we've invited Network Rail to come along to the next Brinicoom meeting, which is in the middle of this month. So we're hoping for some more information on that front. And in the meantime, obviously, any action that's been taken by the County Council, we will bring to that meeting as well. But we do need to keep pressure on this because it is absolutely vital. That bridge is not getting any better, and even able-bodied people now are finding it difficult. It is very, very steep, and it is just becoming very unsuitable.
We're on the way to another Rebecca Ryan.
Do you want to comment on anything that's been said?
I find myself in a similar situation as Christian, really. That I knew the town council had held a meeting. Perhaps I need to pick it up with local members in relation to what at an officer level they're expecting the county council to do, and I can make those arrangements, or perhaps pop along to Brinicoom and find out for myself. I think it's perhaps the best way to do it.
Sorry, Mark.
It's actually a question that I wouldn't mind feeding back the answer to my colleagues in business about Seven Tunnel Junction. And if there are, or if the council officers or members know any plans for the toll plaza, in the area around the toll plaza, because at the presentation that our director gave last week, one of the challenges that we face in South Wales, mainline, lack of car parking spaces. You know, and it's a battle sometimes with local authorities. Yeah. One of the challenges that we face on the whole of the South Wales main line is lack of car parking spaces. You know, and the fact that there aren't that many stations on the main line anyway. But Cardiff is full from about 7 o'clock in the morning. Had a little bit of a battle and a challenge to try and get more car parking spaces put into Cardiff, which still might not be enough for the demand is likely to be. Newport, equally the same. Seven Tunnel Junction, we know, it spreads out into the local area. Now, I've heard some comment about, well, when the tolls go, that toll plaza will be used for something else. It just happens, it does seem to be rather close to a railway station and a railway line. And, in previous years, there has been talk about putting more car parking and having a park and ride rail-based solution for east of Cardiff and east of Newport. Until Mega, Llanwern or St Mellons are built, there aren't that many stations where you can do that, to provide an eastern parkway. And I just wondered if you'd heard anything so that I can then feed it back, so at least people who sort of follow on from me, sort of in Wales, are up to speed and can maybe also do the lobbying of other people to get more car parking at that station.
Yeah, it's true to say that car parking in Seven Tunnel Junction we've just developed really as the opportunity has come along, using parcels of land to just try and improve parking in that area. It would be far from it being a well-organised plan to create that car parking. It is a priority for us to create park and ride at Seven Tunnel Junction and Abergavenny, as and when we can find the funding. I'm not aware that toll plaza are being considered for car parking. I haven't even looked at that. Your mention of it now is the first I've heard of it. feels like a bike ride from there to back to the train, but I don't know it well enough to be able to comment. But definitely park and ride at Untitled Junction is one of our priorities.
We've all heard in the news that Welsh Government, in order to tackle the poor air quality, particularly on certain sections of the M4, they're looking to reduce traffic to 50 mile an hour. Yeah. And actually, they were saying there is a pot of money to try and deal with this, and they were talking about park and ride schemes. And I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity to get in there to see if we can get some capital money for parking space, particularly in Chepstow, because there's also that issue, that dangerous bit of road up to the bridge where there was that death. And the Welsh Government's been involved in that, and they were saying, you know, maybe having a park and ride scheme somewhere to park the cars so that people aren't using that road would be beneficial. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity there with this scheme of reducing pollution.
Well, it's something for us to investigate. Indeed, there is another funding opportunity elsewhere. Failing that, if it's to be developed by the county in isolation, then it has to be on the basis of prudential borrowing to create that. The real ideal is to link it into improved road network into it, to create a proper park and ride arrangement rather than these vehicles chasing down the B4245 to access a park and ride. It needs to be a bigger scheme than purely that. At the moment, hands up, we're developing parking opportunities on the basis of a piece of land's coming available, so we'll put some cars on it. It's not much more sophisticated than that. We just know the demand's there.
Thank you, Roger.
Quite aside from the ridiculousness that is the tolls removal, without any proper planning or consultation or assessment of the impact, it would seem that, you know, if this is about having a much better planned approach and we want to genuinely create a parkway, for want of, to the east, then it would seem that there is an opportunity, there is potentially quite a serious opportunity there if where there's a will, there's often a way. And I wonder whether the capital region is going to amount to anything in these transport terms, whether that's not a question that perhaps we ought to ask, because there is, although I believe it's pretty much like a track, there is an the ambulances use a track pretty much from the toll plaza down to Minutes Lane, which is opposite Severn Tunnel Junction. It's not a proper roadway, but there is an actual, not intended for, but it also speaks to the wider issue as well of, making it attractive, easy to catch the train, getting people off the road. So I don't know what will become of the toll plaza. There's bound to be something there which is equally as ridiculous. But I think that is a question that we should ask, perhaps, a bit more strategically, what are the proposals and where are we? Llanwern is really like a pipe dream, frankly, is finger in the air stuff there, where some of that potential funding has only come forward as a sweetener for the M4 to demonstrate that there is actually a link between integrated transport and the M4. We've also seen a change in the mood music around the M4 just now with the potential for a new First Minister. I think there are lots of things that are up in the air, and it's a really good time to start really pressing on the more on the integrated transport agenda. And if we are organised and first in there, everybody likes, something that can be delivered without too much difficulty. There's always, we create our own difficulties sometimes. But so can we request then, whatever the appropriate route that takes, can we formally raise these with Transport for Wales, with whoever, whatever route this needs to, can we ask these questions, you know, ask, are there any proposals? How can we start developing a proposal around the eastern, because we are doing some ad hoc things at Seven Tunnel Junction. We know that demand is only going to continue to grow. What can we do to preempt that? Thank you.
To me, it plays well into a review of our local transport plan, which we discussed earlier, and including this within it. It is if we're seeking to improve rail, which is what we're doing, public transport, it's unreal to think you're going to have public transport to serve some of those rail places, so we have to accept there will be a certain amount of car travel to get there. It has to form part of that strategy. Park and ride will form part of that strategy to get people onto public transport. And I think we need to accept that and build that into the work we do on doing a review of what is Monmouthshire's priorities and policy in relation to transport. So yeah, I don't know if Councillor Taylor was you and we were having that conversation. We did earlier talk about looking at what is Monmouthshire's priorities, policy, strategy in relation to transport and public transport in particular for the future, so as we have a document which we can use to demonstrate to others that we've given this some thought.
So like
and frankly, therefore give it, help us to take this forward and find some funding.
Thank you, Francis. Of course, there's the LDP coming up again, and it's going to feature in there. That's the big plan for the way ahead, so there's going to be opportunities there. Jez, and then I want Paul to do the mega thing.
Just a quick one, Chepstow, we have this aspiration of building some parking along the side as part of the Fairfield Maybe development, or the Maybe Bridge, whatever you want to call it. But there is some electrical equipment that is positioned there, it turns out. Have we done anything towards trying to start a dialogue with Network Rail to move that electrical equipment and allow us to open up the parking?
No.
Should we?
There is some history to that signalling equipment there.
Yeah, I think it's signalling. Or
in actual fact, we were talking, this is going back now about 7 or 8 years, we were talking to British Rail about the ability to buy land or acquire land one way or another from Maybe Bridge. And they knew that was happening, but they don't talk to the other silo next door to them. So one day, a couple of us went down to the station, and there was a big electrical thing, as you said, to signal. So I don't know really what you do with a monolith like the railways and the National Rail or whatever they want to call it. So I suppose they can move it. Right. Stuart. Paul, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's been an interesting and busy few months since our last meeting, which I can quickly run through for you, if I may. On the 15th of February, we had a visit from officers from the Future Generations Wales Commission. They came down to see what Mega Station was all about and to see whether it was something that they could back and support. They were very impressed with what we're doing because it aligns nicely with the Active Travel Act and all the sustainability interests that they have in mind and which they're supporting. They were particularly interested because they're looking for examples of where the third sector, like groups like Mega, can get involved with the public sector and ensure that active travel is being considered as part of any projects. So they even got TED to do a piece to camera, which is going to be part of their video on their website So that was quite nice. I think it's due any time now, although they're making some changes to the website, so we'll keep an eye out for that. On the 23rd of February, Ted and I and Christian popped along to Mark MacDonald's office because we were a bit concerned that we hadn't heard much progress on the GRIP 3. I think it's fair to say they had stalled a little bit, and with a bit of encouragement we came away happier that they were going to be making some progress very quickly. And I'll speak a bit more about that later. Our mid-month meeting of the Mega Group, Jessica Morden, who occasionally popped in and stayed for the whole meeting, which was quite nice. Showed some real interest there. Moving on to March, the 1st of March, when the snows came, we visited Roger and Christian up at the Mega office, because Roger had picked up on the fact that the station, if coupled with a community centre or even on its own, would require some serious analysis with regard to transport and active travel and parking spaces and such forth. So we had a bit of a discussion on that, and I think we agreed that a proper study needed to be commissioned. I'm not quite sure where we got to that, because one had already started, or part of one, to do with the community centre, but hopefully that'll be extended to continue that to a full study for the Mega Station as well. Perhaps Christian can come back on that later. On the 9th of March, we had the visit from James Price, the CEO of Transport for Wales. He'd promised, when we met him a couple of months previous, to come out and have a look at the site. Again, he was really impressed. He understands the site. He now understands that there's a subway that could be upgraded. There's a footbridge that's already been replaced. So he could see all the potential. And so he's gone away, A, knowing what it's all about, and B, agreeing to keep in communication with the group. We will update him on progress. But perhaps most importantly, he clarified to us that if we get the GRIP 3 completed, if we get a successful sum of money via the new station fund and the Welsh Government gives it the thumbs up, he, or the Transport for Wales, would take the project into their delivery mechanism. So we just got those 3 little hurdles to get out of the way, and hopefully that will happen. So that was good. On the 19th of March, we had a visit from Gwyn Smith from Sustrans. We had a chat to him, and similar to the visit from the Future Generations Commission, it was all about how Mega Station is a new sort of concept, and emphasising it being a walkway and sustainable transport and access to it. So we've agreed to work with them as well on an ongoing basis. 23rd of March, we put in our response to the Cardiff Capital Region's transport strategy. So that was helpful. We also met with Jessica Morden again, and she said it would be good if she could put a question to the Minister via either Prime Minister's questions time or perhaps open another debate. So we helped to prepare a speech for that, should it happen, which I'll come on to later. What month are we into now? April. The options report now, as part of GRIP 3, we've received the draft version of it, so that proved that Mark MacDonald moved on with it, and we expect to get, we've actually also received the draft strategic outline business case as well. So that is moving forward now. Perhaps Christine can fill in a little bit more around that as well. And perhaps the climax of the month really is the end of day debate, which Jessica Morden secured, took place on Monday evening this week. It was a good 20-25 minutes long, and Joe Johnson, the Transport Minister, responded quite positively, I thought, into what Jessica was reporting on. That clip of that debate can be seen on our website. If you go into the home page, there's a link there. It'll take you directly to that 20-25 minute debate. So we've had a very interesting few months, really, and we've also put our plan together for the next 12 months. And that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think the work that's gone in on the project, and there's been absolutely first class. So you're almost a textbook example of how to do it, isn't it? And you've all been involved. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, we actually got the transfer assessment for the community centre. I got it yesterday and have had a chance to look at it. We'll do this as well. And I mean, just can't stress enough thanks for the help, because it's just all the work which the community group is doing is driving this project forward. That's really where quite a bit of it gets done.
Right. Number 9 is the bus services. We don't have Richard here to be able to answer the questions, but we will have opportunity to do that. Although Roger here will speak to it in his absence and tell us how we move ahead with it. The one thing I will say, I think this has been kicked into the long grass for long enough now. I think we have to get rid of it somehow or other, because we're not making the most of the bus services that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Richard offers his apologies. I'm afraid there's some operational issues which we're having to deal with today, along with some staffing matters, so unfortunately he's unable to be here. I can tell you that we have commissioned the gentleman actually who managed the rural transport plan development to carry on a piece of work in relation to our bus services, to look at what we provide now and to look at what the future may look like for the provision of bus transport within Monmouthshire. So that piece of work has been commissioned very recently, I'd have to say, but it has been commissioned in terms of reference for that study. I believe have been agreed by Kelly and Richard with the gentleman, but I've met the gentleman, he knows what we're looking at, and that piece of work will ultimately be brought back probably to yourselves. There is an issue about what we do now, but it's more looking towards the future, and again plays towards your review and our vision of what transport looks like in the future. So that piece of work is now underway. It will, more my view, personal view on the matter at the moment, we will have to look at affordability and use and how that can best be worked through, and what that might look like in the future. So I think in terms of public transport, as far as buses is concerned, it will be a useful piece of work. Because again, personally, I feel we're almost at a cusp really between does public transport become more attractive to residents to try and get them out of their cars. As cars become less acceptable, as cost of transport goes up, public transport, there's a lot of talk about it, there's a lot of push in that direction. Well, how do you actually achieve it? How do you actually get people to use it more? And what's the cost of doing so? And I think that will be a useful piece of work. I suspect there'll be a certain amount of speculation within it. It will have to be, but I think that is a piece of work which we do desperately need, because we do talk a lot about improving public transport, the right thing to do, rural transport. But what exactly does that look like, and can you afford it if nobody gets on a bus? And that's there's a little fundamental issue to deal with there, I think.
Just on that report, is that an assessment of the situation, or is it an assessment of the situation with some kind of ideas and options? And is there a timeline that we can look forward to when that report will be finished, and what will the process be? Will it come to us? Will it then go to scrutiny? That kind of thing.
It's definitely to look at where we are now, because it will look at how the service is provided at the moment. I suspect it will look at the state of the industry, which might seem a funny thing to talk about, but the number of bus operators is reducing. So there is an issue around who's there to take up the work and what does it look like. I think virtually all, not all, but the vast majority of our routes is subsidised because they're not commercially in their own right. There are a few, but very few. So we have to look at it, what's it look like now? What's the state of the industry at the moment? And what's it going to look like in the future? Do we do more on-demand, the grassroots type service? Do we move down that route? Is there other alternatives available? And that is a piece of work which I would anticipate coming from that. I haven't got the timescales for you, but I...
This year?
Oh yeah, definitely within this. Oh yeah. Well, the report will be within this year. I suspect the solution might be a bit further off, but yes, you will definitely be seeing a report in this year.
Jez? I mean, no, it's just a fun bit of information for you, really, regarding the buses. There's a
Trying to cheer us up now.
Trying to cheer you up. Yeah, there's in Stockholm recently they've put self-driving electric buses on the road. Unfortunately, they're geared to urban operation, but you know, it's worth recognising that there may be at some point in the next 5 years some more technological solutions that we can use. So, yeah.
I'd like to mention it. I think it's a fundamental, this is my view now, as an officer looking at this, there has to be a fundamental move. Either at a national level we're going to support the roads, or you're going to pump more money into transport. If you look in that's a good example, isn't it? A lot of money pumped into that, which is it's innovative solution, isn't it? It probably costs a lot of investment money to get it going. But if that's the way to go, then it's a case of putting your money where your mouth is, to make it an attractive option to jumping in your car, to alternative to jumping in your car, and that's a massive piece of work to be done. But,
Francis?
Yeah, so I think Phil said, and you know, we've been asking for this piece of work for some time now, and really born out of the question, the key question. So you're right. Obviously, we are aware of the climate now. That you know, it's an ever decreasing circle of use, isn't it? So as the buses become more unreliable, people don't use them. You know, the primary users become the people with subsidised passes, and it just kind of gets a smaller and smaller circle. So that is obviously right, that we have to understand the way the industry is moving. But equally, and I've been saying for like ages now, all of the bus routes are subsidised pretty much. Is that you know, the right use of that subsidy now? You know, is there? So you talked about on demand, like grassroots, but there's also probably something in the middle. We also have a situation where, for example, you've got you know, the shift in health services towards the Grange University Hospital for acute matters and a reconfiguration of services. We know that you know, there's a desire to look at those desire lines, those travel routes, and there's probably issues around where people go that we need to understand more these days. You know, now things have changed, people's travel patterns change, don't they? And we probably not, what we're doing probably is we're just allowing the shape of the bus providers and their woes. We never ahead to say, actually, we can see this is the way things are going. Therefore, rather than putting all our money into subsidising these routes that we know only take 5 people a week, we need to think about doing it in a completely different way. So I think that we have to look forward to that, because if you look at all our population assessments, all our, you know, the wellbeing of future generation assessments, key issue, transport. Issues for young people, you know, for the first time we're seeing the numbers of young people taking up driving licenses falling. All sorts of drivers for that, but you know, the world has moved on, and you know, we have in this particular county, due to a bit of a misapprehension that we're purely rural, been, you know, really wed to the car for a long time, and it shows in, you know, for example, where our county hall is. frankly. But anyway, I think we've got to get past the old ways of thinking, and if we're genuine, and you know, there is some thinking which is a bit more 21st century, 22nd century, not much, but there is a bit, whereas we're sort of wed to the 18th century really when it comes to transport, aren't we? We're probably better off in the 18th century, frankly. Thanks.
If I'm going to just to reflect upon that, I think we perpetuate the same old, and have that. And you don't have to go back to the 18th century. You can go back to when I've been using public transport, which is in the 70s, when the routes through the rural areas were much, much more regular. Well, they don't exist, quite frankly. Where I used to live, I could catch a bus morning and afternoon. It weren't that often, but they were there. There's no bus goes out there now. There's no buses in the middle of Monmouthshire. Well, North Middle, Montillio, Newcastle.
The other issue is we're talking about this technology. We all see it, driverless buses and electric trams and everything else, and it's really glorious, but they don't go up Hardwick Hill, a lot of them. You have to think about some of the terrain which we're asking our buses to go through.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
You know, well, yeah. There probably is. You know, you could get to the moon. We never thought that would happen, but think how many.
Has it really happened though?
You're one of these flat Earth people, I can tell. The point is, it is the cost of the units, and it's, as Roger has said, we don't own any buses. We hire in, and the cost of the vehicles, you've got to have usage to pay for them.
If I may, but what's the cost of not having good quality connected public transport? We see it now, you know, the massive investment in loneliness, isolation, massive, you know, public service investments elsewhere, you know, sort of further downstream, which some of them, at the heart of them, are about people not being able to access wider things in their community. But, you know, there are costs associated to not having public transport routes in place, aren't there, as we know?
I agree with what you're saying, Francis. All I'm saying is have a care that you don't get seduced by some of these sexy things that you see on the television, because they don't work in places, but work in places in Monmouthshire. We have a particular topography, haven't we, in Monmouthshire?
I'm not easily seduced, We digress.
I'll only slightly digress, Mr. Chairman. We have, in our spare time, approached Welsh Government to actually look at what the opportunities are for more sustainable fuel and use of transport in Monmouthshire. And they have commissioned a study, and we're working with them to look at options around electric, albeit we're not sure of that one. But hydrogen is another option which we are looking at in terms of sustainable fuels, both for our own fleet and possibly for public transport in the future. So that, at some point, the outcome of that will come back. It has, us having approached them and provided and gained that interest, Welsh Government have now commissioned a company to do that piece of work, and they're working with officers on that. But we'll bring the outcome of that back to yourselves.
Chair, if I may, I mean, I know I work for a train company, but we are obviously part of a group that operates buses as well. And I think we are involved in one way, shape or form through the next kind of, you know, way of propelling sort of a road vehicle. I'm still to be convinced about driverless vehicles full stop. And I've heard presentations of Uber, you know, recently reckon it'll be a sort of life-changing thing. Still remain convinced, but I mean, the first bus, for example, over in Bristol had its infamous poo bus, but it's also got a couple of vehicles which they got UK government funding for, using sort of waste to sort of create into sort of a compressed gas. Yeah. And the cost of actually operating that bus compared with sticking diesel in it, and obviously the low emissions, the cost went significantly down. I mean, there's obviously other byproducts in terms of you could sell the energy back to sort of others in the community. And it's actually, if somehow with the bus, you know, be they large or small bus companies, you can actually bring their cost of operating down, then it makes them way more viable, you know, even in the rural sort of areas. Because I mean, I remain convinced about how autonomous vehicles and even electric vehicles would work anywhere, you know, in the rural community, rural North Devon, rural Cornwall, or sort of rural sort of Monmouthshire. But it's kind of, there are some solutions out there that have already been sort of tested, albeit in urban areas, and the kind of benefits that are coming of them, which when you've got a commercial bus company, if you can reduce your operating costs, boom, you're then on the way to go. So there are solutions out there, I suggest.
Okay, I want to move on. Time schedule, I'm sure we'll just.
On scepticism, it's good to be sceptical, but GWR's famous chief engineer, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, encountered resistance to building London to Bristol line because residents thought the speed of the train would boil their brains. Let's not be those people.
Chair. Chair.
Can I just raise a specific issue as Roger is you? I've raised it with the two Richards and I copied in Christian. Last week we had this, because this is strategic to quite a number of people in our area. We had a problem with the hospital and the parking situation in the hospital, where Stagecoach stopped their bus drivers going into the hospital. And the solution, so I had a number of complaints locally on with my council hat, and the solution that the Stagecoach drivers gave to very elderly people was they need to pick up the bus in Brecon Road, which is the stop is about a half a mile or so away, or go to the Waitrose stop, which would be a suicidal mission for most of them to try and get to the Waitrose stop outside Abergavenny. So Richard Cook has replied to me saying there's a possibility perhaps of a site meeting with an Iron Bevan to look at solutions to parking there. One solution I've put to an Iron Bevan, which might affect MCC and might come out of active travel, I don't know whether active travel is in that area, but is to punch a hole in the little grass area where the Brecon bus stop is on the main road, and just have the buses going down Brecon Road, coming in, close off just a few spaces to make a bus park at the end of the car park, and then the buses could come in and out without going in and out of the car park. But the car parking situation there is dire, and you know, it's people are missing their appointments, and then when they come out their appointment, they're told, where can I pick up a bus if the bus is not going through? It's you're going to need to walk down the road 3/4 of a mile, half a mile, or cross about 5 different roads to try and get a bus, which is not an acceptable solution. So Richard did mention that they might hold some sort of site meeting on that.
Richard?
Can I just declare an interest, Chair? I'm a board member.
I think that's a good idea. I'll have a word with Richard Cook, my colleague, and we probably also need someone from Highways, and we'll organise a meeting to see what could be done on that per thing. Can I just maybe point out 2 more quick bus items? There's actually a Welsh Government-led bus summit in Swansea tomorrow. A bus summit which is led by the minister, so we'll wait the best what's going on. I think Richard Cope is attending. It's by invitation. I had one, but I won't go. Got other things to do, so maybe if anyone else wants to go, they can pretend be me. Also, one of the key things on the council website are the bus timetables. They're one of the top 10 pages, and our communications teams have nailed us down to look at what could be done. So there should be at least a slight improvement within the next week or so. This is just generally the layout of the pages and the information which is given, not that much change to the actual individual bits, but we're also looking into the actual PDF timetables. Some of them are, well, let's put it like this, some of them are better than others, but between them there are quite big of differences, so hopefully that's coming up. It's not a big thing, but hopefully it makes it a bit more user-friendly. And sorry, I should probably saying that there are some longer-term plans, and I think I best circulate them around what we are trying to do.
Francis, and then Dave.
Only just that I don't know if anybody uses the My Monmouthshire app for the bus timetable. No. You can't get it if you haven't got obviously 3G in those places.
Francis, could you put your microphone on?
Sorry, just to say, I don't know if we should promote also, because I don't know how many people use this, because more and more people are downloading the My Monmouthshire app now, because actually you can use parent pay on it, which to a lot of parents is really, really helpful, because they can basically go to an app but consequentially also have the bus timetables on there, which as long as they're kept up to date is really helpful for people when they're out and about potentially. And I just don't know, Christian, if we really advertise that very well either. And perhaps we could do a bit more around, tweeting about it. Because, there are lots of tweets, thousands come out from Monmouthshire every day, but not about bus timetables, just to say.
Yeah, and my plea would be that if you could try to do so, get some maps of the routes on the website, because I've been involved in the public realm works in Abergavenny, and even local people aren't quite sure where all the buses go, and that would be a great help to users as well, I'm sure.
You've had a good consultant, though, haven't you? They're going to get in the bus routes through now. You keep asking me.
Oh, well, yes. Things are moving on.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points here. First of all, regarding the meeting, if you do want a successful meeting at Neville Hall with regards, Christian, with regard to the difficulty the buses are having, because that is actually on my patch. I'd like to come along as possible. Okay. Second point, bus timetables. I volunteer at the Tourist Information Centre, and that's one of the most commonly asked questions. And yes, please, maps of the routes on the website would be helpful. The paper copies of the timetables come out occasionally, but very often they're out of date, within a couple of months. So we do look online, and yes, the My Monmouthshire app is excellent, because we point people in that direction as well to find timetables. But it is very difficult to source information for bus routes. That I know they're available in the one-stop shop in the library, but the Tourist Information Centre is another area where people constantly come and ask this question. So any information that could be held and updated regarding the bus stops and maps of routes on the website, yes, please. It is badly needed.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Only to say that it's a point which has been made before. We will see what can be done about improving that.
Are we missing a trick here in the sense that let's get some bits of paper printed up saying that the My Monmouthshire app has all the information on it, and put it in the bus stops that everybody keeps telling us we don't have our timetables in, so at least we can point them to download the app. It's the best point of advertising possibly that we could use. So, yeah, isn't it? So that would be quite an easy thing to action, could actually get us quite a lot of love. School buses, the service, particularly I'm mostly aware, I'm a governor of the Dell School in my ward, and I'm very aware that their service has been extremely compromised of late, particularly coming in from Mathen. Only this morning we had a half dozen 7-year-olds that are taking tests, stuck in the rain, unaware that their bus was going to be delayed, all convinced they were going to miss their tests and getting fraught. And it seems more and more lately there has been a lot of unreliability in the school service that comes to and from the Dell. Now, I've heard tell that partly that's because the fleet is down by 4 buses and everything's in need of service. Can you tell me whether that is accurate or not, or what we can do to try and make it more reliable?
There is work being done around the condition of the fleet at the moment. I can't go into a great deal more than that. I can tell you that there are 4 buses down today. Whether or not they all service the Dell, I wouldn't know. If there's a specific issue around the Dell, then I can investigate that and come back to you. And generally, yeah, it won't be because they're not serviced. They have to be serviced by law. They cannot just be left to run out on the road. But whether or not we have got an issue around replacements, and perhaps the time has come to replace a significant number of the fleet, or do we look back to the private sector to take that on and reduce our fleet? It's just speculation on my behalf, but at the moment, yeah, we have got an issue around the age and around some of the condition of some of the vehicles. But if there's a specific around the Dell, then I can ask about that and ask them to respond to you.
Yeah, I've noticed a significant rise over the course of this year of incidents of the buses being late or cancelled or broken down, and the communication can be quite poor of that as well to the parents. So, yeah, if you could look into it, it'd be brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah, just on the time, just to go back to the timetables, I think there's a good improvement certainly on Stagecoach with timetables on the buses now. So the new customer services manager there has done a good job in getting plenty of bus timetables on the train. I think Anslow's in our area as well also has plenty of timetables. So the one thing to do is always to say, if you can't, obviously if you don't know there's a bus coming, you've got a bit of a problem. The biggest problem, of course, is that there's now no staff to change the bus timetables on the physical timetables on any of the bus stop. Richard Cook tells me that there's no staff to do that any longer. So, you know.
To pick up on that, it's a piece we haven't picked up on. I'm wondering if it's something we should be approaching the town and community councils and just send the information out to them and ask them to do it. Is my solution for it at the moment. There aren't anybody. There isn't anybody there to go around and physically go around to the bus stops and put the notices up. That's where we are. But I know town and community councils want to help a lot more.
If you give me those pieces of paper with my Monmouthshire app on it, I'll put them up in my ward. So, quite happy.
Okay. Any other business? Last item. Any other business? I missed one.
Yeah, sorry. But I've got some other business, but do you want to do the 8466?
8466 Road Valley update.
Yes, Chairman, I won't be long doing that. Those who go up the Wye Valley will be aware of the issues. We've got 2 sets of traffic lights at the moment, still. We've got a slip just south of Tinton as well. And well, that's enough for now. There's 3 of them, and we need to find a longer-term solution to where we carried out a temporary repair last year. I've written to the Minister to seek support for funding to carry out the remedial works in the valley, not purely on the basis that we got problems with our highway, but more in relation to the impact it has upon residents, commuting, businesses, tourism and the like. So I've written on that basis. I await the outcome. In any event, there's works to be done there, and that's also been raised with my finance colleagues about how we're going to find the funding to do that. There's already been about £500,000 spent in there, roughly, it has taken a long time this time, and continues to run on, and in this instance largely because of ecological issues and when we could actually carry out works, and also to find a solution. The one slip, if anybody's been down there, they will notice the one slip is particularly large lump of rock. which is protruding out. You can see it's fissured away from the bedrock. How do we fix that? Do we fix it back? They carried out trial fixings, anchors that we couldn't be confident that would hold, so we're now going to batter that back, but that hit into ecological issues because it's an ancient wood, so we had to get permissions to carry out that work. So that, along with ecological studies, has frustrated the process, I'd have to say, but it's particularly frustrated those who use it on a regular basis. So we can do nothing but apologise, but we are trying to find some solutions to it. The one section will actually probably be a netting solution, I think, rather than anything else. But we've also carried out a study throughout the valley, whilst this has been going on, to see what else is in there. We know there are other areas in there which are at risk. And similarly, going north from Monmouth up towards Staunton, we have similar problems as well. So we will look for what funding and support we can get to turn that into a more reliable highway.
Because that's kind of my neck of the woods. I suppose it is a big neck of the woods. It's interesting because we've had problems with increased traffic along that bottom road and speed, but obviously with those lights in place, that problem has reduced, and now we're seeing a higher level of traffic on the upper road, because I think they're just deciding going through the lights is a bit too much, so they've now started coming up the other upper road from Chepstow to Monmouth, you know, going through kind of the Trellick village and everything. So we've got some massive lorries making their way up there, and how the heck they get around Trellick, I do not know. So not for anything to be done about it, it's just really just a kind of it's just interesting that the whole campaign for the lower road and the traffic has kind of disappeared a little bit, because I think they're thinking the conditions are good. They quite like it, I think, but we don't like it at the top road. So anyway, just observation really.
Thank you very much for the feedback.
You were talking about the large trucks going up over the top. You're absolutely right, but one of the things one has to bear in mind as well is those trucks normally go over Bigsware Bridge, and exactly. they shouldn't be going over there either. Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So although it is frustrating having this, it's actually answering some of our problems. Yeah.
I've actually stopped the car, got out, and gone back to a truck driver and said, "You're not taking that across the bridge."
Yeah. I mean, technically, shouldn't be going across.
And as Steffi says, I must stop doing it because I'm going to get smacked in the whatever one of these days. But the other thing is, that makes it worse, is that a lot of these trucks that are being British registered companies are being driven by Polish whatever, and they all work off sat-navs. Yeah. And you could see they say, "Oh, it's on my sat-nav." No. Well, read the signs. And they don't read the signs, they just read the sat-navs, and that's why we're getting these problems.
Most of them go to Llanelli, end up in Llanelli Hill, so that's even better.
Sorry I missed the update, Roger. We go to any other business now. Is there any other business? Dick.
Yeah, you're probably all aware, certainly anybody who's been through the town, that traffic congestion has been rather increased of late on the trunk road through Abergavenny. That may settle down a bit, we wait and see. But it was interesting to read recently that Nick Ramsey had made an approach to Ken Skates on the rerouting of the A40, which would presumably mean to take it through Llanfoist. I just wonder if the County Council has a position on that. It was an issue best part of 10 years ago, but it died at the time, and I just wonder if the council is taking any action in liaison with Nick Ramsey or anything, to make the case for that rerouting of the trunk route, which will ease the situation in the town a little, no doubt, but also open up a few other traffic management opportunities, probably.
My recollection is the last correspondence we received back from the Minister was that they would not be pursuing redirecting the trunk road other than through Abergavenny. From the critical. Like that, are you? Well, yeah. At least they've given us a position. It mightn't be a position we like, but at least they've given us a definitive position. At the moment, they will not be pursuing that any further. We could, if members were of a mind, we could write and express our concern. But I'm not sure it would take us much further. But it has been raised. They've given us a position. I'm not sure if members wish that a further letter goes back to the Minister, then I can draft a letter. But we've had a clear indication.
I mean, I think you'd actually have to prepare a case, wouldn't you, of a worsening situation endorsed by Welsh Government, etc., etc. And I was just wondering whether anybody was doing that, really.
No, not from our end at the moment.
No more questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. I hope you found it helpful.
Last point of order was confirming the time in the next meeting. And I just wanted to say, if we're going to do the idea of the vision, do we want to have a little extra meeting to look at that so we can get it into the the food chain for full council? Yeah.
Very big point take on that, Mr. Chairman, would be to bring it back to yourselves and do it as a workshop arrangement rather than this type of arrangement whereby we can spend some time looking through exactly what that is and giving your insight at that point.
Yep. You're very insightful.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the point about the A40? I would make a report on this meeting to the Brinicum meeting as a standing item. Would you like me to include that on the next report to the Brinicum meeting to see how the members feel there? Taking out for, making a case or, what action local members would like to see regarding this.
Any more points, any more questions? Surely
you're the kid in the classroom, and any more questions?
Right.
They weren't like that in my classroom.
To confirm the date and time of the next meeting, it's Wednesday the 19th of September. I'm sure it'll come around incredibly quickly. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I hope you found it worthwhile. We still got through a load of stuff or another. Francis?
I just wanted to make a point, really. It's not related directly to our agenda, but just to say we had the first Newport marathon come through Monmouthshire and through Mega. Yay! And I just wanted to say that although we talk about transport rather than highways, our colleagues in, under Roger's direction did do a very good job, because Monmouthshire didn't invest anything in it, but the feedback about Monmouthshire and about Mega, it has been immense, I have to say. So what very little, it's just an example, I think, perhaps sometimes for very, very little goodwill, not financial investment, we can bring benefit. But unlike the Velathon, there wasn't any, big, sexy, exciting input from Monmouthshire. But they were like, oh, well, we're not putting anything in. We haven't got anything to put in. We haven't got any. And I was like, well, I don't want you to put any money in. I just want you to have a little bit of coordination, a little bit of... And that, sort of upped the game a little bit. But, yes, just to say thank you. And I have passed on directly my thanks to your colleagues in those teams. But if you would also, Roger, thanks.
They find their way to the station?
Yes, well, look, you see the station. Come on the train.
Yeah.
And you rode Martin Lake.
I did, I saw that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Still
very much.
recovering.
Safe journey, guys. Thank you, Dave.
No, Chair, thank you.